Central Oregon Autism Moms Podcast. I'm Kate. Let's spend some time together. 49% of autistic children wander from their safe environments, a rate nearly 4 times higher than their neurotypical siblings. Welcome to the Central Oregon Autism Moms Podcast, Episode 5. Children on the spectrum are 8 times more likely to wander between the ages of 7 and 10 than their typically developing siblings. Central Oregon experienced this firsthand last week, when a 7-year-old autistic girl with Down syndrome wandered from her home in Lapine. She was found 2 hours later safe and in good spirits, thanks to her brother and local emergency responders. This made me realize how easy it is for something like this to happen, especially with children on the spectrum, so I went searching for resources. Aware.org has a list of what to do in case someone you love wanders. They say to stay calm, call 911, search nearby water first, and implement your family wandering emergency plan, which is included in their Big Red Safety Toolkit. The Big Red Safety Toolkit, which can be downloaded for free from their website, helps families organize the information they need, contact local law enforcement, and start the conversation with teachers and neighbors about their child's tendency to wander. Corporal Neil Mackey from the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office took the time this week to talk to me about Project Lifesaver, a program Deschutes County participates in that helps families of children and adults with medical conditions that increase wandering. So can you tell me a little about what is Project Lifesaver?
It's actually a program that started in Virginia a number of years ago, and there were some concerns by some of the search and rescue folks there on, specifically then it was Alzheimer's patients that were disappearing. And law enforcement kind of took a blasé attitude of, it was the old thing about, well, they're going to have to be waiting or missing for 48 hours before we can go look for them. Well, that's changed. There's been a lot of court decisions, there's been a lot of civil suits. It was a good kick in the butt for law enforcement that when you're going to deal with somebody who in some way is mentally diminished, whether it be Alzheimer's, whether it be Asperger's, autism, Down syndrome, whatever, if these folks are not able to think and care for themselves, then somebody has to be a caretaker for it, and by extension, if they come up missing, that's law enforcement. So the days of having to wait 48 hours from somebody missing are long gone. There were some real tragedies where Alzheimer's patients would take off from nursing homes and things like that, and law enforcement would drive around the block and do a topical effort to try to find them, write it off because they couldn't find them, and 2 days later they'd find somebody frozen to death in a snowbank a quarter mile from where they went missing. So some folks back in Virginia said, this is not a good thing. So what they did is they actually went to the fish and wildlife industry, and they said, Fish and Wildlife has been using these tracking monitors to track wildlife, to track migration, specific animals, things like that. And it was a good fit. A lot of people think that Project Lifesaver is GPS based, which means it's pulling a signal from a satellite in the sky. Project Lifesaver has nothing to do with GPS. The reason why is because it's prohibitively more expensive, and to be able to have a transmitter on somebody would be big enough that they probably wouldn't use it at all. So this uses what's called radio frequency. It actually broadcasts on a specific radio frequency. So the advantage of that is it's less of a cost. It's more manageable. The transmitters are like the size of a wristwatch. It does have a more limited range, but there's ways to be able to work around that. So in the about 15 years since Project Lifesaver went international, it went across the United States, and I think there's about 700 agencies that are participating, and I know there's at least 3 in Oregon right now, including us. They've had almost 3,000 successful finds, and the average find time is something like 17 minutes or something like that. So it was basically a way to be able to help folks that are caretaking older parents that may have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, parents who have adolescents who have maybe been diagnosed with Asperger's or autism or Down syndrome that are caring for them at home. Now we kind of draw the line if somebody has a parent that's in a, like Altera, Alzheimer's care facility, we don't let them participate. It sounds kind of mean, but we don't do that, because if people are paying good money to have a place watch these folks, that should be their responsibility to keep tabs on them. This is designed more for a middle-aged couple that they're kind of the sandwich generation. They still got young kids at home, but they got their parents, one or both parents there, and maybe they've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's. So they're caring for them in a residential setting, and this is designed to maybe give them a little bit of relief to what happens if these folks decide that they're going to take off.
How long has the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office been participating in Project Lifesaver?
I think we got involved about almost 4 years ago. We had somebody from Polk County over in the valley who was the first sheriff's office in Oregon to participate in it. They came down and did a train the trainer thing. So it initially became part of our search and rescue unit because it was a good fit. I mean, if somebody's lost, you're going to search and find them. So it became part of our search and rescue. I now kind of run things, but there's still a search and rescue aspect to it. So right now we don't have a whole lot of clients. I think we have 4 clients. It's growing, but it's one of those things that we have to make it kind of manageable, because we have to make sure that we have enough people that are trained to be able to go out and actually find somebody. Right now it's pretty much me, and I'm not around 24/7, and if I'm gone on vacation, what do you do? So we're in the process of actually putting together another training class to be able to get some additional, be SAR volunteers, be some of our citizen volunteers, be some of our reserves, other people that are going to be around, so we can kind of have that 24-hour coverage.
So where does the funding from Project Lifesaver come from?
Well, Sheriff Blanton actually came up with an initial grant. This is not a super expensive program, but to get in the door, we have a couple of tracking kits, and I can show those to you here a little bit later, give you an idea, but they come in like a gun case. And so there's an actual receiver, there's 2 different kinds of antennas, there's some stuff that goes with that. Well, each one of those search kits is $2,500. And then the initial cost to get the transmitters run about $300 a piece. I mean, there's nothing, CIA spooky about it or anything like that, but, basically it's an electronic device and it does cost money to get. So initially we got like 10 transmitters, and we ended up getting the 2 search kits. When somebody signs up for this, if they can afford it, either by paying or if they can write it off on insurance, because there are some insurance companies that look at this as basically risk reduction. By being a participant in this, you're going to reduce any kind of claims against an insurance company if somebody goes out, runs, gets lost, gets hurt. So there are some insurance companies that will pay for this. So if somebody can swing it, it's $300 up front and $10 a month to do the battery changes. We do have a form that somebody can fill out based on their income, that if they can't swing that, we basically give them a pass on it and we get them enrolled at no cost.
49% of autistic children attempt to elope. How can Project Lifesaver help protect these children and help their families?
Well, I'm not the parent of an autistic child. I work with a lot of folks, so I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm some sort of an expert on autism. I'm not. I know enough to make me dangerous, and that's about it. The biggest thing, I think, is a little bit of peace of mind. I mean, we're kind of blunt right up front when somebody comes in by telling them right up front, this is not a babysitting service. And that sounds a little cruel, if you will, but we want people to understand that by getting enrolled in Project Lifesaver, by getting a transmitter on a mom or a dad or an adolescent, this does not relieve the caretaker from their responsibility of watching over for that particular client. And that's what we refer to our people as our clients, not patients, but clients. So it gives a little bit of peace of mind. The case that we had here last week, little 7-year-old gal, very active. She's a bolter, so I mean, they got to watch the door all the time because she sees an open door, she's out the door. They back up right to a great big chunk of national forest land. And so you have to remember that a lot of times, depending on the diagnosis, whether it's Alzheimer's or Asperger's or autism, you can't think in normal senses about where that person might be going, because depending on the individual, they are attracted to different things. The only real commonality between those 3 and including Down syndrome is there seems to be a fascination with water, okay? So a lot of times we're looking to see if there's water nearby, but probably for the parents, it's one of those things that they know that if they call because somebody that they're caring for or runs out the door or comes up missing, they know that they're going to get a law enforcement response. Part of that's going to be search and rescue. Part of that is going to be Project Lifesaver if they're enrolled in the program. And once we explain to them and kind of give them a demo on how the program works, it gives them some peace of mind that if something does happen, we're going to be able to find them pretty quick.
Can any child diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder enroll in Project Lifesaver?
It depends on the individual. Part of this comes down to having some cooperation both from the caretakers, which mom and dad or uncle or grandparents or whatever. There's usually not an issue there. But you will find some people, it's easier with adolescents to maybe give them a little bit of a con job about, okay, we're going to give you the secret agent watch here, okay, or the secret agent walkie-talkie. And I've got a Down syndrome client. He's probably 11 or 12 years old. He's somewhat functional, but that was my hook with him. Okay, this is your secret agent thing, so you can talk to us, and so he'll talk it and everything like that. He doesn't have any problem wearing it. There are other people that, depending on their diagnosis, depending on their functionality, they just won't tolerate wearing something on their wrist. They're going to pick at it all the time. The bands are fairly cut-proof unless you get a pair of scissors to cut them off. But part of it comes down to when we get somebody enrolled, a lot of times we'll go for a week or two with just kind of a dummy transmitter to get them used to it. There's some backup things that we can do. We can stick them on a necklace, but necklaces are easily removed. We can put them on an ankle. But there's still maybe the pick factor at it. You could lace it into somebody's shoes, but you can't always guarantee the shoes that they run off with are the shoes that has the transmitter in it. So that's why we generally go with a watch. It's easily seen, usually fairly well tolerated. But we tell people up front, that's part of the contract, that if the parents don't follow through with what they need to do by checking the battery every day with this little tester, by letting us know if there's an issue, or if the client that's involved removes that transmitter three or more times, they're done, because there's no sense in forcing the issue. So this is an optional thing. It's something to try to give somebody an option to say, let's see if it'll work. If it does, great. If it doesn't, then you may have to go back and do something else.
If there's a family that's interested in enrolling a child in Project Lifesaver, what is the process for that?
Basically, they come and talk to me, and I'll give you some contact information on that. There's information on the Sheriff's Department website about it. The folks that came in this morning took me about 40 minutes to go through. I gave them a demonstration about how things work. We talked a little bit about some of the pluses and minuses of it, the fact that it's not the magic thing. It's not like, again, if it was GPS based, I could whip out my smartphone and go, and I could actually come down with, where they're at, and I could tell if they were moving or not. Well, because we're not GPS based, we don't have that luxury. The biggest thing is that when we sit down and we know that we're going to enroll somebody in it, we go through and do a client profile, which takes pretty near an hour, because we get into some very specific things. The caretakers have to sign a HIPAA release, which gives us some information that we don't give it to anybody else, but it's for our purposes. So there's some things in there that might be a little bit touchy as far as what's the clinical diagnosis, are they on any medication, things like that, because we want to build a complete profile about who this person is, okay? Ultimately, what happens is that after we get them enrolled is we put the caretaker's address in the 911 dispatch system. Now, a lot of times when you come from a cell phone, it might show your cell phone number, but it won't necessarily give your address. If you're calling from a hardline phone, okay, the minute you call in, it actually automatically pops up with the address. So what we do is we put all of that client information down in the notes section. So we kind of preload that. So, if you were caretaking somebody and they disappeared, when you called up, the last thing you want to do is play 200 questions with the dispatcher. It's like, come find my kid, right? So by grading ahead of the curve and having all this information, including a photograph, okay, which the field units can actually bring up out in the field on their in-car computers and stuff like that. It saves a lot of wear and tear on the caretaker by having to play all these questions with dispatch. It puts it all down at the bottom, gives the address, it gives a description of the client, how their height, weight, hair color, what their clinical diagnosis is, what their frequency number is, that type of thing. So again, it preloads it with a lot of information, and basically if you call up and say, my Project Lifesaver client is missing, somebody's going to be on the way real quick.
Where can someone find more information about Project Lifesaver?
If they go to the website, which is Project Lifesaver International, okay, that's got all of the information about the history of the program and a lot of the success stories and a lot of the history on how all of this came out. And I think it's projectlifesaver.org, org for organization. So that's kind of like the national clearinghouse back in Virginia that started all this and runs everything now. They basically keep our client database and stuff like that. Give us a thing to where once a month we go in. That's the other thing is once we get somebody signed up, the parents once a day they get a little receiver, and all they have to do is wave it over it. If the red light is blinking, that means that transmitter is active. Okay. And again, this works on radio frequency, so it works like on 216 to 219 megahertz. Well, that sounds like only 3 numbers. Well, you can change every 1,000th of a degree on the frequency. So if somebody's at 216.777 and I get another client that's close by, I'm not going to put them real close. I'm going to put them at the other end, so it may be at 219.450 or something like that, so we don't end up with mixed signals. So the parents have to check it every day. We generally go out and change the battery once a month. The batteries are actually good for 60 days, but just to err on the side of caution, we get an old battery or something like that, and to ensure these things are working, we go out and change the battery, give them a new wrist strap, check and see, has their demeanor changed? Are they becoming more aggressive, more passive, whatever, so that we're keeping that profile kind of up to date. The other thing is that it helps build the rapport. And I'm servicing all of our clients now, so I know all of them. So if one of them happened to take off, it's going to be me that shows up that's going to find them, and they know me. So if we have 14 volunteers and we have 14 clients out there, you want to try to build that relationship between the volunteer and the client, because chances are they're the ones that are going to go out and look for that specific client. You want to capitalize on the fact that client, no matter what their functionality is, has some face recognition with that person that comes and sees them once a month. Okay.
Does Crook, Jefferson, and the surrounding counties have Project Lifesaver as well?
Jefferson has talked about it, but I don't think they're on board yet. Crook has talked about it, and I think they're the same way. So we've had some requests from people in both counties, and because of the response time, because of the responsibilities and things like that, we've basically had to refer them back to those respective agencies. So we'll cover people in Deschutes County. The nice thing about Project Lifesaver is that there's a little bit of portability, if you will. We have some folks that live here in town, and I think it's his mother lives up in Port Townsend, Washington, and she's been diagnosed with probably second, third stage Alzheimer's. Okay, but she comes down to visit once a year. So the nice part is that when she gets ready to come down and visit, they call me. I got a hold of the Project Lifesaver coordinator up in the county that we're Port Townsend that got all the information. So when she travels down here, she becomes my responsibility. I know what her frequency is. If she runs off, I can go out and look for her. We had another kiddo that mom and dad decided they were going to take him to Disneyland, and they were worried about him disappearing in the crowd type of thing. And we got a hold of Orange County, which I think is the county where Disneyland is at. They're a Project Lifesaver organization, and so I called them and said, hey, I got a Project Lifesaver client, he's coming down to see you, here's the information. And it gave them a little bit of peace of mind that if something happened there at Disneyland, they're not going to call me because I can't come down there and find them, but they've got a local agency that would do exactly the same thing. So there's a little bit of portability that goes with that, depending on what neck of the woods you're going to go to.
That's great. What tips do you have for a family with a child or family member who's prone to wandering?
Well, the biggest thing would be to check with us and see if there's something that we can do to help you out, whether it's Project Lifesaver, whether it's, there's a boatload of agencies out there that can provide help and assistance. Some caretakers figure they can't afford it. Some caretakers, maybe pride gets in the way and they go, I don't want anybody else involved or whatever. But I think the biggest thing is to help the caretakers realize that they're not in this alone. Ultimately, they're the ones who are responsible for taking care of the client. But I think the education is the biggest thing. I know the last couple of years, training-wise, we've put in a lot of training for our patrol folks, and not only dealing with PTSD from some of the veterans that are coming back from the Middle East, but we've gone a lot further into getting into what are the do's and don'ts dealing with Alzheimer's, what are the do's and don'ts in dealing with Asperger's or Alzheimer's or autism or Down syndrome. The biggest thing would be, even if somebody doesn't want to participate in Project Lifesaver, is to maybe give us a call if they live out in the county, is maybe give us a call and let us at least put something in the notes of the call. So if somebody calls up and they're pretty upset because somebody's taken out, again, instead of having to play 200 questions with the dispatcher, we've got a little information there that saves a lot of wear and tear on those folks as far as, there's a 17-year-old Down syndrome a client that lives here or whatever,
Absolutely. So what should a family do if their child wanders from their home?
First thing to do is call 911. Okay. I mean, and people get a little confused sometimes. They go, well, when do I call 911 and when do I call the non-emergency line? Okay. As far as I'm concerned, somebody disappearing that is not able to function on their own, that's getting into emergency situation. Especially if the weather's cold or they live near a lake or whatever. That's kind of getting into emergency type of thing. So call 911. Okay, and get us on board real quick. Okay, because we've got resources. We have resident deputies that live in different areas. They'll drop what they're doing and run to it. If you want to see some activity, somebody calls up and says they got a missing 3-year-old, it used to be, okay, we'll send one car. Now there's about 14 cars that go. Everybody and their mother goes because we take it seriously, because we've had way too mmany situations where, is it a child abduction? Do you find a 3-year-old floating in the stock pond because they fell in and drowned? I mean, that's just a tragedy. That's, it's horrible. So call 911, all right, check your residence. Okay, I found kids hiding in the darndest places. Okay, somebody calls up and says, my 5-year-old is missing. Well, where's the last place you saw him? Well, he was in his bedroom taking a nap, and now he's not there. And so, you go back and go, okay, is his bed up against the wall? Because we found kids that rolled off the bed between the edge of the bed and the wall, and they're actually down there to where you can't see them from the doorway type of thing. So look at the normal places where they're going to be. You might want to let the neighbors know. All right. The biggest thing that we deal with is this equation that says time equals distance. The longer somebody's missing, the broader the area is where they could be. And so the sooner we get notified, the sooner we can get people in the area. Obviously we're going to have somebody go to the house. I'm going to get notified. If they're a Project Lifesaver client, I'm going to whip down there with the equipment and start doing my thing there. There's a possibility that we could use some of the patrol dogs that we have, but there's limitations in Central Oregon for doing that, because if it's 95 degrees outside, you might be able to work that dog for 20 minutes before it's blown, because the dog's going to pant because it's hot, and if it's panting, its mouth is open, it's not inhaling through its nose, it's not going to be a very good option. Okay, at night, during the winter, different situation. Maybe let some of your neighbors know. Okay, have a phone tree or something like that. So if Johnny comes up missing, you do the phone tree, because having lots of eyes and ears. Okay, and the other thing is maybe keep a little log to where if you have somebody who has disappeared before, where'd they go and where were they found? Because a lot of times it will get kind of repetitive to where if there's an attractant over here, good chance that maybe they went back to it a second time as well. We deal with this with Alzheimer's patients a lot. That's why we go into the client profile so much about, okay, what did Mr. Smith do when he was working? Okay, well, they worked for the railroad. So that ought to be a tip that if there's a railroad anywhere nearby, that might be an attractant. Okay, he was a mill worker or whatever. So you're looking for things to try to start chopping this down. Our rule in search and rescue work and Project Lifesaver is that if we rule out where you ain't, chances are we're going to find out where you is. But that time to distance thing is the biggest thing, because sometimes we'll have people that'll wait 2 hours. And a good, healthy person, and a lot of times these people don't have a destination in mind. They're just going. Okay, they're like a heat-seeking missile with no particular destination. They're just going. So a good, healthy person, whether it's a teenager or a lot of times people think that Alzheimer's patients are not in really good shape. No, that's not true. Some of these folks are in good shape. Good average person at a good, healthy walk can do 3-4 miles an hour. So if somebody delays for 2 hours, that gives me an 8-mile search radius. Residence or the place last seen is right in the middle, and now I got to draw an 8-mile circle around that. That's a lot of territory to try to cover.
And what should someone do if they come across a child who appears to be lost or perhaps may have wandered?
Well, this is interesting, because a lot of times you have parents that do the danger stranger thing, don't respond to strangers and stuff like that. And I would say the biggest thing is to get on the phone to 911, because chances are you're going to be the bookend at the other end of the call. We've already had somebody call up and go, my child is missing. And if you live a couple of doors down the street and you see a 3-year-old toddling down the road and it doesn't look like you, yes, you can go out and see if you can make contact with them, and if that's one of those things where you can do that without, making the kid get into further peril, that's fine. A lot of times with any of these diagnoses, whether it's Alzheimer's or autism or whatever, you got to be really careful about going hands-on with them, because if you approach them in the wrong way, you're going to make the situation worse instead of better. So I would say the biggest thing is if you see something that doesn't look right, okay, you need to call 911 as well, and chances are you're going to be on you're going to be the bookend to the other end of the call. Dispatch will put the two together, and we end up making the fine and getting the child home. But trying to explain the whole danger stranger thing to somebody who is fully functional is difficult enough as it is. I would say out of all of the groups of people that we deal with, the ones that it's probably impossible to get across to are people that have been diagnosed with Down syndrome, because they're just naturally loving. They want to give you a hug and stuff like that, so it's one of those things that you have to take it on an individual basis. I would say the biggest thing is do it calmly, okay? Do it from a distance and work your way in, as opposed to just rushing up on them, unless they're in danger. They're in the middle of the street and there's traffic. You got to do what you got to do. But the biggest thing is just to make kind of a nice, calm approach, make the call, see what you can do to get hands-on with them or contact or whatever, and then, just kind of go from there.
Are there any other services that the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office offers that parents of children on the spectrum should be aware of?
Well, you mean along the lines of Project Lifesaver, or just in general?
Just in general.
We do a lot of stuff. I mean, we have school resource officers that service like the elementary school in Sun River, all three schools in La Pine, a couple of the schools here like Buckingham and Ponderosa. So a lot of times the school resource officers are in there, and we've got a wealth of information, for a lot of things. We'll go in and do show and tell, or, whatever. I mean, that's the whole idea. We're not trying to buck what mom and dad are trying to teach them. But the other thing is that a lot of kids have a natural fear of police officers, okay? And unfortunately, that may be because they come from a family where the cops have been to the house before and they arrested dad because he was smacking mom around. And so, Johnny, who's a second grader, sees the cops come in and hauls daddy off to jail, and that's kind of a negative connotation for him for law enforcement. So the biggest thing is to try to convince the kids that yes, you can trust police officers. If you find yourself in trouble, find a police officer, find a fireman, whatever. If it's somebody in uniform, somebody who looks like they're an authority, those are people that you can trust, even though they don't know me from Adam, and technically I am a stranger, And so a lot of it is just And we have kids that'll buck and run. You get 6-year-old that disappears. We get a call, we go out there, we find the kid, we take him home. That's not the end of it. We'll sit down and have a little chat with them. Have a chat with mom and dad, kind of an education type of thing, to find out, is there a reason why they took off? What can we do to prevent this from happening again? Because otherwise it just turns into this cyclical, kind of thing. So there's a lot of things that we do in the schools as far as danger stranger, bicycle safety, just, the world's a nasty place sometimes, and parents have different kinds of parenting skills, and what might be a priority to you and me might not be a priority to Joe and Sally and their, little Susie or whatever. So we're not trying to be parents, but we're trying to make sure that we don't end up with some needless tragedies out there, and they do happen.
Absolutely. Well, Sheriff Mackey, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with us today.
You're welcome.
Events, activities, and support groups going on in Central Oregon. On September 23rd, FACT is doing another Understanding the IEP training at 5:30 p.m. at the Ben Lapine Administration Building downtown, across from the library. The Central Oregon Autism Moms are having a lunch September 24th at noon at Amanda's house in Redmond. This is a kid-friendly event. Just let either Melissa or Amanda know. There will be plenty of food and stuff for the little ones to do. An American Sign Language class is starting September 25th at the Alice Hatch Center. They will be every Wednesday throughout the school year. The intermediate class will be from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and the beginning class from 5:10 to 6:10. The cost is free, and if you're interested, you can contact the Central Oregon Disability Support Network. September 24th is the Ben Cross Disability Support Group and the Latino Cross Disability Support Group at 6 p.m. at Abilitree. Childcare is provided, and also on the 24th at Abilitree in Bend that night is the Sibs Connect, a support group run for Sibs by Sibs. On September 26th, Connecting Point will be doing an iPads, iTouch, and Apps class from 5:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. at their store on Franklin Avenue. A group music therapy session for children with special needs is happening on September 28th at the Central Oregon Disability Support Network office at 2680 Northeast Twin Knolls Drive. From 10 to 10:45 is the 2 to 7-year-old group, and from 11:15 to noon is the 8-year-olds and above. If you're interested in joining, contact CODSN. Project Connect is happening Saturday, September 28th from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the Hooker Creek Event Center. This is a one-day, one-stop event for guests who are low-income, homeless, or at near homelessness. Guests can receive medical and mental health services, urgent dental care, and more at no cost. If you would be interested in volunteering to help out with this event, go to volunteerconnectnow.org and click on Project Connect. Or you can help man the Central Oregon Disability Support Group booth by contacting CODSN. And dads, don't forget Paul's Club, a support group for the male caregivers of children with disabilities, will be on October 3rd at 6 p.m. at Abby's Pizza. There are 2 new websites that I wanted to pass along to you guys. Autism Live's new series, Parent to Parent, started airing on September 16th at autism-live.com. These feature 2-minute clips that educate parents on all things related to autism. If you or someone you know has concerns about how their child is developing, there's a new site being passed around. It is asqoregon.com. You can use the ASQ questionnaires to check your child's general development. The results can help determine if a child's development is on schedule. If you know another website that we should know about or an event coming up, please let me know so I can pass it along. Well, that about wraps up episode 5 of the Central Oregon Autism Moms podcast. I want to again thank Corporal Neil Mackey from the Deschutes County Sheriff's Office for taking the time to speak with me. If you're interested in participating in the podcast, let me know. I would love to interview you. As always, there will be links to everything we've talked about in the show notes at coampodcast.blogspot.com. You can email me at coampodcast@gmail.com, and you can find the COAM group on Facebook, and you can find all the links of this in the box below this video. The music from the intro was Blessings by The Lovely Moon. You heard Easy Lemon from Kevin MacLeod during the event calendar, and of course, closing up with I Wanna Holler But the Town's Too Small by the Detroit Cobras. All of this great music was brought to us courtesy of freemusicarchive.org.